Morning, everybody. Took us a hot southern minute to get on here. It's 9:03. Welcome to Red Morning. Guess who's back? RulezeroDad. Chesty McWhat?
Chest Rockwell, baby.
That's such like a what was the show that was they had the little rocket thunder something or other?
No, that's actually the one that is one of the characters inside of a character from Boogie Nights.
Oh, was that the Boogie Nights guy?
Yeah, that's not Mark Wahlberg, but John Riley's character. He plays Chest Rockwell. His name is Reed Rothschild, but one of his characters in one of his porn series is Chest Rockwell. So that's where that comes from.
I love it. It's such a Japanese thing where you have this mishmash of porn and 1980s teenage angst comedies talking from a legal perspective. Bounty hunters in space and they're cowboys. It'll sell. All right, run with it.
That's right. Cowboy Bebop meets trash fire.
Yeah. But yeah, and now finally we got you and Carl together, the two smartest guys I know who can sit there and talk shit about my shirts. Hey, Carl.
Hey, that's a waste of cerebrum, but we'll go from there, I guess.
Hey, Carl.
I'm just glad you fixed the sex here. I mean, your boyfriend really messed that up while he was dressing you.
Yeah, that's great. It's much easier when I have nothing on your side to pick on except for a shirt that's making fun of me as a picture staring at me.
Hey, just be happy I didn't put up the QQ22 shirt. That way we'd have numerologists running wild in our chat.
Oh, man. You know what? All I'm going to do from now on for that...
for Spurgs.
Yeah, it's just the counting game from was it the Pointer Sisters? Just put up that little thing, number 12. This tweet brought to you by number 12. The Pink Bill by Ryan Stone. Thank you, Rian. Okay, so I guess our topic today, we were going to keep it simple, just the top 2% versus the top 20%. I figure, Corey, you're the new one here. Get us started on what your thoughts are on being a top 2% man versus a top 20%, and the average guy, why he gets those two confused.
Well, the main reason why the average guy gets the top 20 versus the top 2 confused is because you're never really presented with an image of what the top 20 looks like. At least you're never given a realistic image of what the top 20 looks like. Most people that I know don't even really understand how much people make as an example compared to other people. And you have to, in many cases, look down at statistics to figure out, well, where do I sit with regard to my peers as far as my income is concerned. And they find out that most people either grossly overreport what they make, or they don't, or they don't understand what people bring in as a household. For the longest,
people lie up about their income. Well, I've never. Oh.
Yeah. I mean, when the average household income in the U.S. Up until recently was still making under $50,000 for a family of 4. That's the average across the board. I mean, so you're looking at the 50% there, and to get 30 points higher than that, you're only talking another $30,000. So to be in the top 20% of earners in the U.S. as a family of 4, you're only looking somewhere in the $80,000 to $90,000 range. And if you were to believe every entrepreneur and person on Twitter, if you're not pulling down 6 figs, immediately as a dude, you're failing miserably. And I think that is one component immediately on this whole 2% versus 20% thing. And I really like of Wudan, also known as Tristan, this is other Andrew Tate. But guys like him are sometimes ones that skew the view as to what it is that people make and what's attainable. And I would consider him probably, as far as earners per year are concerned, close to the top 2%. I mean, you don't own 3 supercars and rent a pretty nice place in the middle of Eastern Europe. If you don't make that kind of money to support that type of lifestyle. So again, it's a lot more to do with image than reality when we're dealing with top 2 versus top 20. And
it's funny too, because even he complains constantly because those guys are old, like follow the USSR money, which is huge, and they dwarf him. So he looks at himself the same way that the average guy looks at him. It's like, I'm never going to be able to get that much. So it's all everywhere you go. It's always somebody else looking up and seeing something they can't attain.
Yeah, and I think that in terms of anything, whether it's finance, physique, ability to pull, if you're picking up, top 2% isn't a realistic way to look at things, and it's not a good metric of success when you're dealing with things, because you don't need to be in the top 2% of anything. Most of the time in any system, you're always working off from the Pareto principle, and it's 80% of all of your energy is put into 20% of the results. And the same thing here, when you distribute who is doing well and who isn't in any system, it's generally the top 20 are the ones who are getting reaping the most rewards for their activity. So if you are the top 20% in any niche, whether it's income, looks, physique, things that are measurable to a certain extent, you're gonna find your place, and you're gonna do well, being attractive to a certain segment of the population, regardless. So it's a more realistic metric to work toward, and to get to that top 20 compared to most people now. Another thing that's sad about that is it's incredibly easy.
Everybody just gets out of your way. It's not even a competition anymore.
Correct. I mean, if you look at the number of obese people in North America, as an example, getting into the top 20% is easy, is very easy, especially when the majority of the population now is technically obese. They have a body mass index of well over 40. The average size of a woman's dress now, as an example, just from 10 years ago was 14 previously, which is, not necessarily land whale, more in the ham beast area. It has now moved up to 18.
Even let's take Saturday Night Live. Remember when Jim Belushi used to be the fat one? And then you look at him now.
Yeah, they had to go, really big with Chris Farley in order to get the fat guy point across. It was John Belushi back then, by the way.
Or John, yeah. Did I say Jim?
Well, I remember seeing something at one point where, like, a carnival back when they still had freak shows, and the fattest woman in the world was 250 pounds. I mean, you go to a Walmart now, and she's dwarfed by 80% of their customers.
Yes, when some of the most vigorous activity in the parking lot of the Walmart is for the rolling mechanized carts, you just see two large people. One grabs a hold of one handle side of the handlebar, and the other grabs a hold of the other, and they kind of just look at each other like, okay, well, who's gonna be able to go inside today? Do I have to get back in my car, or am I gonna have to find another one of these amigos to roll around up and down the aisles while I'm looking for frozen foods, in the garbage processed food section? It's a battle royale of largeness, and it's not fun to watch, especially on a summer where everybody's sweating.
Yeah, well, then I think about it too. Let's go with attractiveness. Let's skip the obesity thing. Just talk about looks and sexual success, whatever. You get that same fat person mentality on thin people, and I think that's exactly what you see when you see those second wave MGTOWs that figure the juice isn't worth the squeeze, although they've never tasted juice in their life, so it's not like they know. And they do that same thing where it's like they don't even try, because any chance of failure is worse than failing because you want to, as opposed to failing because
I was reading Vox Day's posts on Gamma.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of one of the cardinal traits of a gamma male is that they have an extremely narcissistic perspective of themselves internally. and they respond very violently when that's challenged. And by actively going out and trying, they would have to adjust their
Self-image.
let's say valuation of themselves in regards to reality. It's like the conversation I was having with James Spader before we came on. That when you see guys flexing, if you know the business they're in or the area which they're flexing about, it's really freaking easy to tell that they're flexing, because you'll have a guy be like, well, I would never train for running. Well, but I'm in great shape. Okay, how fast can you run a mile now? 4.5 minutes? And that's like almost record area. Or, how much do you bench? Oh, I bench 405 easily for reps. And it's like, well, how often do you lift? Oh, I haven't been to a gym in years. I'm just naturally strong. Or, I run a 7-figure consultancy that I started last year. And okay, so you're charging $1,000 an hour and working 2,000 hours a year then, I suppose.
That's like Remembrance Day. We had a guy down here who was pretending to be a war veteran, had the airborne beret, but he forgot to look into it, and that the airborne division was disbanded in the 90s after that Rwanda incident. It's like everybody who wants to lie, they never say they're a supply tech, and nobody asks questions. They always have to be Rambo.
Yeah, that's taking stolen valor to the masses there. Yeah, that is a problem. Guys who want the credit for being a warrior in real life, and they need to play dress up to feel good about themselves. But getting back to what Carl said, I mean, I look at it a lot of times when dealing with people like, I don't know, lawyers in particular, or even worse, people with law degrees who don't actually practice law, who like to flex the fact that they went to law school. And that, I have some particular people in mind who, work at Planet Fatness, who
I'm sure you do.
That description. But, you can be that guy who says, I have done this, I have done that, but just be careful, because there are people out here in the real world who have experience in the area that you're trying to flex in. And if you, make that mistake of stepping up to the person who's actually done the work, they may, call you out on the carpet for things like that.
Oh, yeah, and embarrassment is probably the worst thing for that kind of guy. Actually, One more thing. Do you remember what it reminds me of? Do you remember last week when we were talking about the smart guy problem, where you don't try because you don't want to not be smart? It's exactly the same thing there, too, with intellect.
Yeah, I think, too, that with the, top 20% of intellect, that's actually more of a difficult place to get to, I would believe, than any of the other things that are more in your control. There's a certain amount of controversy of whether or not IQ is a thing, or whether or not it's a predictor of how much you can learn over time. But at the same time, I think that studies have shown, and performance has shown, that people with higher IQs generally just have an easier time assimilating information, and they do better on tests. And
better potential.
Well, not just that, but a lot of the things that you can do in life come down to tests. I mean, if you're taking the bar exam, for example, and you're a pretty decent learner, and you can get through the rigors of law school, but you're a poor test taker because you don't have the natural aptitude to do it, you're still going to fail the bar exam. And that's 3 years wasted, and $100,000 in tuition because you don't understand what your limitations are. The biggest problem that I see, though, is that we don't search to fix the things that we have easier control over. Hitting the gym, trying to talk to more people so we become more affable and easier in the way that we deal with one another. Those can bring us up into the top 20% easily, because just having the ability to interact with one another is a skill that's being lost as well. You're talking about people being secret kings in their little kingdoms behind keyboards. These people couldn't public speak if you put a gun to their head because they never put themselves out there in order to strengthen that particular muscle, meaning that they just don't want to be criticized in any way. And, not being able to take criticism, I think, is another thing that prevents people from getting into that top 20, which I think is easily achievable, especially as people become less and less social.
Oh, 100%.
I would say with the top 20 thing, too, it's like guys like to, it's one of those things I notice that it's one of those guy things. They love objective KPIs. Like, okay, top 10% is 10% body fat. It's six-figure incomes. It's this and it's that. And it's not hard and it's not a universal law. It's more of a rule of thumb. So it's not like, okay, let's say you get into the top 20% of men, then you get access to the top 60 to 80% of women thing. It's once you're in the top 20% of men, you have access to the full range. But it's like with girls, like a male 10 will still sleep with a female 5 or 6 if he's on a slump or he's out drunk and he just wants to take someone home. And it's the same way with girls. You might be able to get one night stands with some of the higher end girls or something like that, or you might be, but you may not get a relationship or vice versa. It's not, this is not the, let's see, how do I word this to avoid the demonetization stick?
Just say frick.
This is not the GameSpot strategy guide for 100% completion of how to get laid. This is more of a hard and fast rule set for things you can do to get yourself into the top 20%. So, okay, stay in shape, dress well, avoid obvious things like shorts with whales on them and crap. Make enough money that you're comfortable, not necessarily so you attract them from being a provider, but so you can afford to live the kind of lifestyle that would naturally expose you to more women. If you're broke, you have to stay home more, for instance, and you have to cook more of your meals. You have less of an opportunity to go out. So how conducive is that to meeting a girl? Or, if you get obsessed with the gym and your TRT regimen, so you end up sitting at home, overdosing on tren, eating nothing but chicken and broccoli, and arguing with people on Twitter, then that's not conducive to meeting a lot of girls either. I mean, if you're lucky, you might have a couple of girls drop some nudes in your DMs, but it's not like that's going to be the big closer for you. So just look at it as you're building a lifestyle that naturally gets you into the circles you want to be a part of.
I'd say so. Well, here, we got Gen Z Red Pill had a question. So let's say women always date up. It would mean the top 20% of women would go for the top 2% of men, then the top 20 of men go for the top. All right, your math is weird. I don't understand it. So I'll just say how I interpret what you're trying to get at with the Pareto principle. It doesn't, people get this wrong all the time where they think the top 20% of women or the top 20% of men get all the women, like it's a math project. All it means is that the top 20% of guys in any grouping, any social grouping, are the most desirable. How that plays out in the real world tends to be more complex because we're humans. We're not binary. So that doesn't mean unless you're a top 20% guy, you're the only one getting women. I've seen plenty of average and ugly guys getting laid. It just means they have to work that much harder, and they're missing whatever becomes easier when you hit that 20% threshold. You just don't have that. It just means you work harder. You'll probably have less success over the long run because these are just statistics. It's not the, what is it? How do they say it? It's not the terrain, it's the map. The terrain is much different. And having said that, I'm looking at this right now just with the IQ score distribution. The top 20% is only like 115, an IQ of 115. So it's about 15% above the average is the top 20%. It's not hard to be plus 15% in a few different areas, as long as you're willing to put in a little bit of effort. And yeah, like Carl said, once you're up in that range, you're just going to have access to more people because people like their own. So if you're a top 20% man, you're going to be more exposed to the top quintiles of women, and then have girls that are underneath that top 20% more susceptible to your charms. But as far as like making this a fractal thing, that just seems weird.
And it's also not like a girl is walking around with like a color chart for the top 2% of men. Like she goes up to you and she pulls out one of those swatches from Bed Bath and Beyond, and she's like, "No, you're obviously a top 78% guy. I mean, I can't sleep with you. Why are you at this party? We're going to kick you out." It's more about avoiding the obviously unattractive behavior. So having some social skills, do not, spurg out and yell at people. Do not insult people for attention. Be affable. Don't be the guy that sticks out like a sore thumb. If you have to stick out and have a look to you, have a good look to you. Like Kid Rock got away with wearing a wife beater and flip flops at the VMAs because he's Kid Rock. So if what's his name, the guy who plays Iron Man, shows up to the Oscars wearing a wife beater and flip flops, he's not going to get away with that.
Well, yeah, that's the whole point of dress. Is you're dressing for the occasion. Like if I showed up to this podcast in a suit, it would probably look fucking weird. Well, maybe not now because now we got Chesty Rockwell here.
No,
just get my white linen blazer and start rolling up them sleeves.
Hey. We could attract a Don Johnson avatar at some point too. Then probably.
Ooh, we're switching over to full-on mullets. See, I'd probably do Roddy Piper, although Carl would probably fight me for that one.
Yeah, no.
No, you can have Piper. I would rather have. I would rather be Rick Rude. I mean, I heard he was so strong he could slap people, knock people out cold with a slap.
Yeah, he was the most feared guy in the locker room. The rumors are, yeah, he was a national arm wrestling champion. So if he ended up putting a forearm or a hand on you, you were in big trouble.
So one of my favorite wrestling stories of all time is actually it involved. I think it was Rick Rude after he became a Christian. What? He had a real issue with people taking I think it was Rick Rude. It could have been someone else, but the only thing I remember Stone Cold Steve Austin was in the car, and you guys know how Stone Cold Steve Austin talks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And apparently the guy he was in the car with had a real issue with the Lord's name being taken in vain. So after the 300th time on a three-hour car ride, Stone Cold Steve Austin went, "Well, goddamn." The guy went, "Can you stop taking the Lord's name in vain?" and went on a rant with him about it. And, Austin, being Austin, just turned to him, "Well, Rick, goddamn, I'm sorry."
Yeah. Not a good idea with him. He was probably not even Stone Cold then. He was most likely Stunning Steve, and he didn't have any pull in the locker room in Georgia Championship Wrestling at the time when he said that to Rude too. So I mean, combine those two things together, he probably did take a slapping or two.
Oh yeah, those guys. You remember in the 80s back when you went out there, you were pretty much guaranteed that Brutus the Barber Beefcake was going to take your mullet at the end of the show, and that's how you had to make your chops?
Yeah, I mean, you grew out your hair for a year just so you could get put out with a sleeper and have them shave your head.
Yeah. Oh, I guess we're going off topic on this one.
Oh, definitely. We went into old timey pro wrestling there.
80s wrestling is just the best. 80s and 90s when they started having the full on gimmicks and that.
Yeah. Pro wrestling is basically soap operas for men that developed over time, long storylines and that type of thing. But getting back to this whole, well, if I'm not in the top 20, how do I possibly manage to get laid, everybody? I don't understand how this math works. Well, Ribney in the chat ended up saying something that makes perfect sense, and that the difference, the kind of the equalizer here and the force multiplier, if you're only in the 25th percent, is game. You need to be able to speak to people. And a lot of times that can open doors that the person with the objective top 20%, the looks, the vehicle, the clothing might not be able to close to the guy who simply has more charm and is able to close that distance based on his not being unattractive. and that's where I think the need for game, not just gaming women, but gaming everybody in your life to a certain extent, is very important. Everybody's they want to denigrate game to the point of not understanding that it's not just a sexual thing. It's a how to navigate life and social situations in a way where people will remember you and take notice of you apart from other people.
Well, I would add it's got a bit of resolve to it too, because you can be charming as hell, but at the end of the day, there's going to be some times where you either have to be a pushover or you have to stand your ground and maybe burn something. There's a nuance to it too. Like just telling a girl, no, I don't want us to be friends. And they would do that in a charming way. You can be charming and completely roll over on that one. So I would add resolve as like an element to that. That's why I'd hate to use just charm as the sole descriptor.
Well, my issue with it is like we get this whole thing with, with asshole game and like be the charming asshole. And guys forget about the charming part. And it's the same thing I said with Law 36 the other day. I mean, despise the things you cannot have. Ignoring them is the best part, is the best reward or whatever. And what happens is guys despise the things they don't have, but then they rant about them constantly on social media. And that's an unattractive behavior. Whenever you rant about something, that's fundamentally unattractive. Whenever you attack someone, it's fundamentally unattractive. When you ultimatum people, it's unattractive. It's showing that you don't have the capacity to persuade people, so you have to browbeat them instead. And to me, charm is just a way of interacting with people where you don't actually have the need to push your way through. And I think the MMA fighter War Machine is a great example of you have no game except brute force. Because what happened with him is he couldn't persuade his girl to come back to him. He couldn't persuade anything. So he ended up in jail on an aggravated assault charge.
Wait, which guy's this?
And, it's an MMA fighter called War Machine. And what happened with him is he had no charm, no persuasiveness. So what happened was whenever he got challenged or didn't get his way, his only answer was more aggression, more alpha, more in your face. And sooner or later, that gets you an assault charge.
Yeah, part of it was that I think that his partner at the time got off on that a little bit. And when you kind of prod that tiger enough times, it's gonna go off the rails even more than what you would expect. But Carl's right. You can't deal with every situation in a way that doesn't have any modulation. And that's the problem with a lot of people, is that they haven't learned to modulate, whether it's their emotion or their approach. And
well, sorry, I was cutting you off there.
Yeah, and that just takes reps. That takes being rejected to understand what that feeling is like, and to accept it and to move on to somebody else. War Machine is a good example of someone with a scarcity mindset who looks like he should be in an abundance of women, and that's the part of the reason why he went off the rails the way he did.
See, yeah, well, that's the thing too, and they're not even good at it. Like, there's a time when you can show aggression to let people know about your boundaries. I mean, in Fleet School, we used to do it all the time. It was so, like, here's a story on it. When I first started teaching my first class, the senior instructor brought me aside and he goes, look, here's what you do. When you go in there, take the first guy who does anything out of line, doesn't matter how slight, take him into the back, like outside the class. So you're not doing it in front of everybody, but you have to make sure he's within earshot, and just dress him up and dress him down. Yell, scream, act like a hard ass. Then when he's done, have him go back in the class, go grab a coffee. When you get back, never yell at your class again. And that was probably the best advice I ever got. And I think that's the part where the guys who just act with aggression towards everything, they're forgetting. Because it's not the aggression. It's not the lion tamer's whip that scares the lion. It's that anticipation. And that's the part that works. So all you need is just one example of people knowing that once you're pushed hard enough, that something will happen, and then you should never touch it again. And I find that's way more effective than constantly getting in somebody's face. And it sure scares women less because women are scared of everything. They're very like rabbits. But knowing you're a dangerous guy but not acting dangerous, I think that's far more effective in the charm game than just pulling a War Machine. Was he the one that was dating Christy Mack, by the way?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's much better than that.
Yeah, but Ryan, you still have to use it. You have to bring it out. Having the ability to use it and never using it.
Well, yeah, strategic.
Yes, it's strategic because people get numbed to a blunt, forceful approach. If it's used often enough, you just simply become accustomed to it. Mm-hmm. If you're on the receiving end of abuse, and the only way that somebody can get across to you, what it is that they're trying to convey is they have to ramp up the abuse after a while because normal abusiveness just becomes the norm. People can get desensitized to that. And I think what you're talking about is that putting a little bass in your voice and coming into a situation where a boundary's been crossed and you show that aggression, call somebody, the young lady the C word when she least expects it to tell her what it is that she needs to do to get back in line, or to not push something in a conversation past where it needs to be. Or the one that I always like the most is when they try to sneak what they think is a funny jab in, when you're in public and you're around other couples or something. You just have to kind of sit there and smile and stew for a minute. And then you pull her aside and say, you do that shit again to me in public, your ass is going to be walking home. And, if it means I leave you here at the table with the bill and you need to figure out a way to get back to the house. I've seen that strategy used by some guys with their wives, and whether or not you find it to be, too over the top or not. Sometimes somebody just needs to learn that, if you mess with the bull, sometimes you get the horns. But you can't.
Appropriate levels of reciprocation too.
Yeah. But I mean, make it a, that this behavior has now become unacceptable because this is the only time that you've ever seen me this way. And, it's not a flying off the handle being a violent thing. I mean, we talked about it last week. The greatest loss of frame you can have as a man is lashing out at someone who has rejected you. And if you act violently, that's different than being forceful in your conviction and saying that, hey, look, I'm just not going to be treated that way. And regardless of who you are in my life, that's not something that I'm going to accept.
Yeah. All right, Carl. So Khalees, the Emperor, had a question.
Into that a little bit here.
Oh, okay.
Before we go to that one, I just wanted to bring up frame because I keep seeing that whole thing with, you lost frame, etc., being brought up. And I figure we could do like a couple of minutes just discussing, okay, what constitutes a loss of frame? Because one of the things I tweeted out was like the gamma catch 22, where you, where if you block them, that means they won and you lost frame. But if you don't block them, they sit there and hurl abuse. And from my view, you don't lose frame when you tell someone to kindly F off because they are a bundle of sticks. To me, that's maintaining frame as long as you're not yelling at them.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's a calculated response to enforce an internal boundary. You're simply saying that whatever that other person is doing is unacceptable to you, and that you won't remain in a situation where people are behaving in such a way. That's different than the guy who he's with his kid and his wife, and he gets upset at dinner and just flips the table over, or as they're leaving, he puts a hole in the drywall because he's not comfortable with whatever situation that he's in at the time.
Hey, I was telling you my childhood stories in confidence. God damn it.
Well, I mean, that's why you got those refrigerators. You can slide those right along the linoleum and put them in front of all those holes. It's fine. Yeah, just make sure you punch the walls in the kitchen, kids.
Don't hit a stud.
To hide those things. Yes, but I think too. Frame can also be lost not just from an emotional perspective, but from a resolve perspective. Ryan was talking about that earlier in this conversation, that you have to have the resolve to follow through with something. And that also means, defending yourself from, circumstances that require long-term thinking and a long-term strategy. And if you're not prepared to fight long-term battles, you can slowly lose your frame in those as well.
Death by 1,000 concessions.
That's right. You want to bleed to death quickly or slowly. It doesn't really matter. You're still bleeding to death. So, no one wants death as the end contributing factor. So, that's my view on frame is always that it comes from you internally. You impress it upon others around you. They either want to take on your particular worldview or they don't. But that doesn't mean that you have to necessarily force people out. They can be acquaintances. You can need people for certain situations. It doesn't mean that you eschew them completely, but they might not just be your greatest ally in a foxhole when things really hit the fan.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, it's all about value.
Well, I think ultimately the thing with frame is just it's the easiest way to word it is if you look at what a frame is, it's literally 4 pieces of wood stuck together. That forms a boundary around you. If you choose to step outside your boundary and into someone else's boundary, then you lost frame. If you told your kids to stop kicking, throwing a baseball at the painting, that's maintaining frame. It's just about drawing the boundaries and also having responses that are in proportion to the threat. If someone breaks into your house and you happen to have a firearm in there and you happen to utilize that particular firearm in order to defend your house because you were worried that they were going to rob you and potentially do something else, that's not a loss of frame. That's a defensive frame. Mm-hmm. From a metaphorical perspective, I'm not saying shoot anyone. I hate that I have to keep using these clarifications whenever I speak in metaphor, just to make sure that some guy doesn't take this as sound advice.
That's like, what I'm wondering. Is it people doing that on purpose or doing that because they take everything literally, like what's-his-face from Guardians of the Galaxy? I've always wondered which it is, because neither one will admit it's the other one.
Well, I mean, we've experienced it firsthand in the Married Red Pill. I mean, Alpha's Wolf is the guy that Carl was describing. I mean, he was the person who took everything that he read and saw as far as advice on how to improve his life and applied it literally. And there are more dudes out there, I think, than we might realize. And, speaking metaphor does require sometimes a real world clarification as to what it is that we're discussing. Only from the perspective that we're trying to provide nuanced concepts to people who are used to applying those concepts in a very binary way. And, it's like trying to load Windows 96 onto
95.
95 on a Mac machine today. It just doesn't work because the two don't speak to each other very well. There needs to be a lot of recoding and a lot of retraining in order for these types of people to understand what it is that's
and it sucks for them, but they're great examples for others. Like, I often found some of the best value for everybody, myself included, was when some guy took something literally and then another person had to literally explain the nuance of the statement to him. But at the same time, it sucks because the guy you're explaining that subtlety to is probably going to miss out on it.
Well, I like this conversation because I think you guys just touched on the perfect segue to answer Khalees the Emperor's question.
Hey,
Because he asked, what are the major differences?
Sometimes. We're pretty good at this sometimes.
Yeah, I know. It's incredible. I'm really impressed. No, but what he asked was, what are the major differences between top 20% and the 80%? This is charm, abundance mentality. What is it? And I think it's one of those things that you kind of know if you spend a lot of time in the real world. Because like whenever I'm out walking, I kind of keep a mental tally when I'm passing guys. Okay, I'm better looking than that guy. I'm better looking than that guy. I'm better dressed than that guy. The girls I'm dating is hotter than that guy's girl. And I think everyone kind of naturally does that, or I'm more charming than this guy. Or when you walk into a meeting room and there's 20 people in there, you kind of size up the room and okay, who are the major power players in here?
Oh, yeah, it's just instinctual. You're not sitting there puffing your chest or anything, but you give it a consideration.
Yeah. And it's not it's not a hard and fast rule. I could do this mathematically because I could design a model and take like 5, 6, 7, 8, or 10 factors, and based on underlying census data and whatever, it could calculate where you need to be in that top 20%. But what use would it be? It would give you a KPI to measure your self-improvement on. Like if I told you, okay, the average waist size of the American man is 42 inches. The average body fat percentage is 28%. That will give you a metric for where you need to go with, a weight loss program. But it's not a guarantee that you'll be in the top 20% just off that one factor alone. You're going to need to do something with, because I heard a new term the other day, gym cell.
Oh,
and these
you did the 4chan thing, did you?
Yeah, and that's basically guys who are, well, I actually know a couple of them. They're guys that are in great shape, top 5% for physique easily. But they could never date a girl because dating a girl would require them to have a glass of wine every once in a while, to enjoy a pasta dish, or maybe cover her in chocolate syrup and licking it off. And they couldn't possibly lick chocolate syrup off a girl because that would totally blow their carb allowance for the week.
And I guess it's not sexy to lick sucralose off of a girl anyway. Yeah. What is this powder? What are you doing?
The Walton Farm stuff could work, but I mean, it's not really thick enough to stick to anything.
Yeah, but yeah, you're right. One-trick ponies. And that's the part, it reminds me of, I think it was an entrepreneur thing, where they tell you to be very careful about picking your metrics because your metrics end up defining your strategy. And if you're the guy who thinks that looks are the only thing that matter, I think they call it Looksmax. If you're that guy, then you're going to completely blow through you're going to become that bull in the China hutch, like put the blinders on. And the only thing you're focused on is gym to the exclusion of all else.
Yeah.
And sure, if you're maybe top 1%, you might be able to get girls just by standing there with your shirt off. But why make it so hard on yourself when you could be top 20% and be able to hold a sentence?
Yeah. And just to anybody out there, whoever asks, if I'm ever on a show like this again, I will never answer a question that relates to face LMS ever. If you wanted to learn about Looksmaxing, you're not going to be talking to me, and I'm not going to discuss the natural boundaries that you have because of you can't get the looks money status plus face that you believe are required in order to become an attractive person. That feeds into this whole binary metrics problem that Ryan and Carl are discussing, is that you're single tasking to the point where we're seeing articles now in major magazines where people are cutting up their faces in order to meet these metrics. And there's this huge run now on male plastic surgery, sawing up jaws and getting chin implants because they don't feel as though they have the jaw projection and those types of things in order to be attractive to other people.
That's so weird. I've never had a girl grab my jaw and then kiss me after it. I've had her grab just about everything else, but never my jaw.
No, I would rather have her grab me around the belt, and pull me in, as opposed to wanting to Well, let me see if your jaw is in line with the tip of your nose. If I don't see that type of symmetry from a profile perspective, I'm not going to let you fondle me under my shirt.
Well, it's a good thing you weren't here. I think it was like a month ago. Some guy was talking to Carl and I on the chat, and he said, "What did he say, Carl? It was like a type 1 or type 2 jawline or something like that. I can't remember exactly." Yeah, type 2, which I looked it up, and it's like essentially just meant an underbite, which was weird. I'm like, when has a girl ever cared about any of this stuff? It's the blind leading the blind.
Well,
the fact that guys are falling for it is just ridiculous.
Well, the thing I got into, the weirdest thing I heard about was women who had plastic surgery on their vagina to make it look better. And I don't think I've ever known a guy or myself been in a situation where I was like, well, I was going to sleep with her, but when her panties came off, her vagina just didn't look symmetrical.
Yeah, there's that whole inner labia, outer labia proportion problem that some people have put into their minds, and I think the people who are perpetuating that actually haven't seen enough vaginas to really be a good judge anyway. Oh, she's just a roast beef sandwich, been blasted out since she was 17 years old. I don't want to get with that. I need something that's clean and pure. Okay, well, for one thing, labia shape and the length of inner and outer labia have nothing to do with how many times you've had sex. So, get that myth out of your mind immediately. The roast beef sandwich isn't made, guys.
No, that's a genetic thing.
It's a feature, not a flaw. So again, this is all gamma, dumbass, inexperienced talk that gets put out into the world as fact, when in fact 90% of it is bullshit. And people who have actually had sex with more than 10 women will immediately tell you that you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
My best tell on when a guy has slept with a decent amount of women? It's when they can tell an embarrassing sex story that makes them look bad. I have never seen a guy who's not sexually successful be able to have that ability.
Yeah, I mean, if you've never been with a woman and you got her into a sexual position that filled her up with air and it created all the worst sounds in the world across the room, then literally you've never been fucking. I mean, seriously, you have been a missionary man pumping away at one or two girls, and you don't have the notch count to even enter into a conversation about what it is to have sloppy, embarrassing situations where you can sit there and laugh with each other, as opposed to, oh my gosh, I'm mortified by the fact that shit went downhill.
I have a story that I want to tell on this, and I'm choosing between two, but I want to save the ghost pepper one for later. But I'm sure you're familiar with those new condoms that came out that have like a numbing agent on them.
No.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. I mean, I think that a lot of that is all in the mind and not necessarily the sensitivity of your unit, but go ahead.
Yeah, so anyway, I got a couple of these, and there are these packs where 20 different condoms, and it's all different ones, so you can try them out. So I grabbed one of these with the numbing agent on, and I put it on, and we're going at it, and all of a sudden I start to go soft. And I'm like, crap, I can't feel a thing. I can't feel my unit anymore. So I pull out, get the condom off, and she's like, oh, we have to fix that. So she gets down on her knees and starts blowing me to get my unit going. And she keeps going for about 20 seconds. She looks up at me, and she goes, my mouth just went numb.
What can you do but laugh in that situation?
Carl, what did you do to me?
Yeah, you don't have any other choice. I mean, the girl just looked like she just walked out of oral surgery like 2 minutes earlier.
My lips, Carl. Why? I can't keep the spit in my mouth right now. Jesus.
See, that stuff, I find that stuff fun. It was the same as when I first started running game and I started becoming successful with it. After a while, just picking up a girl and then sleeping with her, it kind of gets boring if it's just like a straightforward roadmap. So you kind of want to change it up. You almost started to enjoy the shutdowns, like the worse ones, the better, because at least it was some variety. I just don't understand why guys have, well, I understand it's a narcissism thing, but I don't get why guys can't enjoy the little hiccups that life throws at you, especially on something so inconsequential as picking up women.
No, well, that's actual intimacy. All of this weird shit that goes down with people, that you're sleeping with, whether it be in relationships or whether it be somebody you just picked up that day. Those foibles and weird stops and starts and shit that you can laugh about, that's what makes this stuff interesting. I mean, the mechanics of the act are one thing, but I mean, it's the shared experience. That's the intimacy part. That's the fun part of sex, not the scripted bullshit you see in porn. I mean, this is the outtakes. This is actually the fun stuff. So, but anyway, that's just how I look at it. Not every event can be perfect for either one of you, and if you can laugh about it afterwards and say, "Hey, can we try that again?" That's always a better outcome than saying, "Well, I'm mortified that we didn't have a perfect performance the first time around. What do we do about this now? Because this is just weird between us."
And hey, that's the answer to that question. What is frame? If you can actually get past that event with a laugh and a smile and no aversion whatsoever to trying it again, I mean, that's kind of the quintessential example, I think.
Yeah, the fact that you can, do something and screw it up so badly that the only thing that you can really do is both of you is laugh, and she's still interested enough to you to basically say, yeah, I'm comfortable with the fact that you don't really give a shit, and that you're somebody that I'm still viscerally attracted to. Yeah, I'm going to fall back into your frame. Let's try round two. Yeah, and that's definitely an excellent assessment of what frame is, particularly in that moment.
And then a perfect segue. I'll throws off to you, Carl. For Mark, you want to do that first, or Marcus's question first?
No, I was going to remark on the conversation, because one of the things that I'm sitting with that I think Corey just put in a very good way is a lot of this seems like it's guys sitting around thinking and not doing. Because I wrote an essay a couple of years ago, and I don't have a Rolo magic memory for all my essays, but it dealt with two things: the perfect solution fallacy and the nirvana fallacy.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to find a perfect guy. You're never going to be a perfect guy, and you're never going to find a perfect girl. So you just have to take the whole thing with perfect out of your mind. You have to accept that all humans are messy. It's like one of the two things I've heard is like every girl you walk past on the street has at some point had food poisoning after Indian food and has choked on a dick. Just keep that in your mind. If you're with an extremely attractive woman, she's been on the toilet with the cold sweats, shaking, just begging for it to please be over. And once you get to that point and you just accept that there's no such thing as the perfect alpha Chad with, he has the $1 million business, the perfect body, the perfect class 1 jaw, the perfect teeth, an IQ of 160. Like, look at guys with an IQ of 160 are usually, rather socially awkward and tend to not do very well with women. A lot of bodybuilders who are near perfect bodies don't do well with women. A lot of guys in finance who have the highest incomes don't do well with women. And you just have to kind of accept that you have to
There's a Goldilocks zone you want to be in.
Yeah, there's a Goldilocks zone where you're good enough, you're tall enough for her to ride you, but not so tall that you have no interest in being ridden. Because that's an issue too. So you're going to have to find that sweet spot between where your value as a man needs to be and where you want your life to be. Like I told you earlier, like I'm never going to be at 8% body fat and jacked to the gills. I like food and drinking too much.
Oh, same here. There's no way. I mean, I think that in some circles, you know, particularly finance and some others, you know, there's a lot of social interaction that revolves around, you know, food and beverage, and that's another skill that can be developed as well. You know, learning what good stuff is. And that also is you know, impressive in certain circles, but it is a Goldilocks rule. I think that you know, being perfect in most instances is being very boring. In order not to make mistakes, you have to become more pensive and less active, lest you put yourself out there and your proof of concept is proven false by, you know, girls who won't give up their position in a stupid argument. You need to be that guy who rolls with the punches and is willing to accept a loss here and there to get to the goal of being, you know, a more well-rounded, happier person, not the perfect person.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Do you want to be right or do you want to win?
Yeah,
And a lot of
that's
guys
kind of
want to
where
be
I
right.
get with. Well, that's where I get with a lot of the let's call them slightly gamma comments on whenever you do a podcast where you have your face out there. I don't do them on principle, but how many times have your looks been insulted in the past month?
You know, funny enough, it's mostly anti-Semitism towards me, which is completely baffling.
Yeah, well, I do admit the Shecklestone thing was kind of funny.
Hey, did you see I did a little nod to that when I did my first vlog there? At the end, it's like, let's go see the fan mail, and it's up in the top corner. I'm like, all right, enough of that. It's a little Easter egg for people.
No, the thing is, guys were always expect like this perfect avatar of alpha. And that guy doesn't exist. Like, you have a couple of guys who are going to be close. Like, you have these really preppy 6'2" lacrosse guys attending an Ivy League school. Yeah, guys can be close to perfect value when they're 22. Very few are at 30 when life gets a hold of them and beats the crap out of them for a decade. So you can always tell, and it goes kind of back to what we were talking about, like the guy who's ripped and shredded at 22 when he's attending his degree in finance, he's not going to be ripped and shredded when he's been on 4 hours of sleep and up with clients drinking and partying 6 nights a week for 10 years. And that's actually one of the things that Steve the Dean says that I really agree with, is that you have to develop yourself as a man apart from external things. If you're so dependent on everything external for being that guy who approaches women, who tries to sleep with women, who sleeps with women, if you're so hooked on, I have to have this car, I have to have this gym bot, I have to deadlift this much, you're not, the women become secondary, and you switch from all of those things. All of those things are a means to an end. Mm-hmm. They're not the end in itself. And a lot of guys have a way of getting those means because they're easier, they're not challenging, and making
there's no failure. They're unfalsifiable.
They forget hitting on chicks. It's like, I've got my deadlift to 600 pounds. Okay, cool. How many girls have you hit on? None.
Which is weird because you can pick them up very easily at this point, even the fat ones.
Yeah, you should put one over each shoulder just to see who laughs when it happens. I mean, there's no question about strength being important when it comes to, you know, being a man of value. But if you're not going to go into a bar every once in a while and just, you know, see a 2-set and you know, grab each one by the waist and throw them over your shoulder and walk them around a bar for 30 seconds and put them down every once in a while, there's no point in being, you know, the mountain from Game of Thrones. It simply becomes a caricature that you need to play for everybody, as opposed to you know, a person that is truly attractive. You go too far in one direction, you become that person, you become that stereotype. You know, I mean, why do we talk about some of the pickup guys so much in their appearance? It's because that is their trademark. That's what we remember them for, not necessarily that the person was a nice guy or that he had any other intrinsic qualities beyond the fact that he wore top hats and put on, black nail polish. Be the guy that's remembered for, the important things, not for the very obvious character things.
Well, that's the thing. And I thought, I know this is like a little one-off you did there, but when you said approaching a 2-set, where was it? There was, that thing I put up on Twitter, I think it was a week ago, where a guy was approaching a 19-year-old's birthday party, got shot down, then he went up and asked, "Why are you hurting my feelings, little girl?" And then she ripped into him further. I don't think guys understand how important it is, especially in the age of Tinder, to open smaller sets of girls. If you're going at any more than 2 girls, like a girl and her wingman, you're probably going to get shot down, even if she likes you, because at that point, she's attaching her anti-slut defense to it. And in front of all her friends, if she sees a guy hitting on her, if they see a guy hitting on her and she responds, they're going to automatically start shaming her. So she's almost obliged to call you a creep and make you cry. But aside from that, and then there's a question from Marcus 3 about what to do about uninteresting conversations with women. I would say there is no such thing as an uninteresting conversation with women. There's just a guy who insufficiently he's not able to entertain himself. And I'm sure, I don't know if you guys had this, but my game was always like, everything was always about entertaining my ADHD. Sometimes I would just say dumb things just to see them give me a goofy look on their face so I could have a big shit-eating grin on mine.
Yeah,
that's a good answer to his question.
Well, what I always found with uninteresting conversations with women is that you can steer them to make them interesting. All you need to do is start asking questions to her about things that interest you, that you want to know about her. If you're on a first date, don't get into, what's your favorite position. I mean, that's not a good question to ask to make the conversation interesting to you. But at the same time, you can ask her things about, what are your hobbies? Do you like pets? What do you do when you're not hanging out with strange guys? Ask things in such a way to either slightly put her on the defensive or to qualify herself to you. And if she's one of these people who needs to be complimented constantly and you're the one who's putting in all the work in the conversation, that at the end of this date, you don't need to see this person again. So make it entertaining for yourself.
My thing is just whenever you get into one of those conversations, there are 2 approaches. First one, bring up Evola, Lacan, Sizek. Nothing drops panties on girls more than talking continental philosophy.
Oh man, yes.
Just go hard on the continental philosophy, especially chapter 4 of Evola's Critique of America. That makes girls, that drains her panties right there.
Yeah.
The second one is always whenever they get into that, just start making fun of her. If she likes you, she's going to start defending herself, and she's going to just keep putting her in little boxes. And
she'll gladly correct you.
And just whenever she jumps out of a box, put her in a new one.
That's right.
So let's say she starts talking about, she's going to school or whatever. Accuse her of being a nerd. She starts telling you why she's not a nerd. You accuse her of being a party girl. She starts to claim she's not a party girl. You accuse her of spending last weekend with Motley Crue doing cocaine in New York. Just keep going that way. And as you accelerate, you'll naturally make the conversation fun. And this is why I think every guy should do at least a couple of sets of comedy at some point during an open mic, just to get that fluidity that you're the one in control of this conversation. She's not in control of it. You're giving her something by interacting with her. Be different. Don't be the guy who's standing there lapping everything up and look interesting. Make the conversation entertaining to you. At this point, I'm not even in it to get laid anymore. I just want to entertain myself.
Yeah, that's totally it. And here's the funny thing too. So And this is why I always loved the cube when I ran my routine, was that what you described, all those putting her into boxes, have her fight her way out, and you're having a good joking time with it. At the end of that, you've basically learned everything you would want to know about her without having to give her 20 questions or a job interview on a date, which if you guys do that, don't do that. There is nothing less attractive than giving a girl your checklist of questions.
No, it's best to try and set everything up. Ryan's very good at describing the differences between open and closed conversation. And if you ever want to read any of his stuff about that, and if he writes more stuff about it, that would be very useful to anybody who's trying to figure out how to talk to the opposite sex. You want to make the conversation as open-ended as possible, and also to be inviting. And that particular dynamic is incredibly important. When speaking to women, they will talk about themselves if you allow them to, and you ask them leading questions that are entertaining to you to make the conversation interesting. And if she can't pick up on your cues and you're not getting the answers that you enjoy, there's always another date with somebody else, 3 days from now. That's the issue here. You're trying to
find people forget some girls have no game and they're just horrible at it.
Yeah, right. I mean, sometimes it's nerves. Sometimes it's just that they're stuck behind a desk or in a basement someplace working 70 hours a week, just like you. Things don't come naturally to people, including, simple interactions like talking to people of the opposite sex. And a lot of times too, the person who gives as good as she gets might be the person that you're the most interested in. I mean, I tell this story every once in a while. My wife opened me essentially by saying, "Hey, I hear you think you're pretty smart." That's that's a person who's going to end up giving as good as they get. And sometimes you need that foil. Somebody that you are more antagonistic against, and it's more playful at that point than it is, a job interview. Is this a person I'm going to let anywhere near my penis? Well, maybe, if she answers all of these questions correctly. That's not how this works. It's a banter. It's not a qualification. And if you have fun with somebody immediately and you're talking, that's going to translate to other places as well.
I also think it comes down to a lot of guys are so focused on getting that notch that they don't actually ask themselves the question, is this girl actually worthy of being on my notch list? Because a lot of the time, I would estimate that 70% of my dates are with boring girls. These are the type of girls, they show up to the date and they open you with, "So, how was your day at work? What do you do for a living? Oh, that's interesting. Can you describe what you do in detail?" So I have a whole routine for, kind of disqualifying that. Like, how was your day at work? Really exhausting. I feel extremely drained. Oh, what do you do? I'm a porn star.
Excellent. Yeah.
Just keep going that.
I work at the Tyson Chicken Factory, and I count the number of heads in the bin at the end of the day. And man, all those eyes looking at you like that, it's just the creepiest goddamn thing you've ever seen.
You guys are much more creative than me. I just say I'm an accountant with a big goofy smile on my face.
No, the whole thing with it is just a lot of the time, because I think guys get focused on getting the notch and they don't actually ask themselves, is this a girl I could stand having 5 minutes of pillow talk with afterwards? And I mean, call me a romantic, but I actually enjoy interacting with girls outside of sleeping with them. So I like to know that there's actually a conversation, that I could actually stand a conversation with this girl for 5 minutes before I sleep with her. And if we're having fun on the date and we click right away, that's always a good sign, but it's not a guarantee.
Well, Carl, you're out of the club. You actually enjoy the company of women. I am now offended at the fact that you call yourself a red pill wearer. You need to come into the office later on and get your shit and leave, because I'm going to get you've proven that You care about yourself and your interactions with the opposite sex, and we just can't have that.
No respecting women here. Thank you very much.
No. It messes with our rep.
Yeah,
that's the nuance
I'll
to
show
it.
up for the Ebola spanking paddle later.
Well,
that's the nuance to it too. It's like you like them for what they are, not for what you want them to be.
Yeah, imagine that. And if you have enough of an abundance mindset, you meet enough people, you can continue to believe that way and meet somebody that actually meets that metric as opposed to what you want people to be. And what you want people to be is a scarcity mindset. It's saying that you're going to mold someone who has an appearance of somebody that I may want to spend time with into a person that has the personality that I want to spend more time with. It doesn't work that way. If you have the ability to be attracted to more than one person, you never run into this problem.
Well, that's the thing. It's a narcissistic fantasy too. It's not even that the guy wants a girl to be this certain way with a certain personality and the certain things. It's that he knows for the kind of guy that he wants to be, this is the kind of girl that guy would want to go for. It's the same as guys thinking they need to be perfect Chad. They think they need to have perfect Stacy. And so any girl that doesn't meet up to that reflects badly on his narcissistic fantasy. Yep. And that's why a lot of these guys end up getting very angry with women. It's because narcissistic rage is really the only response to somebody attacking that narrative.
Yeah. Don't you understand how awesome I am? I will make you love me.
Yeah.
And that's the worst human being that you could possibly run into.
Oh God, yeah.
It's like I dropped that on Twitter the other day. Like someone was like something about gurus, and I was like, I don't actually consider myself a guru. I consider myself a deeply flawed human being who's made enough mistakes and hopefully can teach someone else to avoid those mistakes.
Yeah, well, I've never seen any of us, like nobody, not you, not Rollo, not me, not Donovan, not Corey, not TD or Troy Francis. Nobody has ever called themselves a guru. The only guy who's ever used that unironically are the guys that are just shitting on us or shitting on any like notable person. They impart guru onto us just so they can shoot it down. It's like that Nietzsche thing. You build up your god so you can burn them later.
Yeah, same as the guys, people who use the word degenerate unironically.
Yeah, I'm sorry I touched more than one boob in my life, guys. If that makes me a degenerate, then, call me whatever you want.
Stop ruining my wife for me by having sex with her before she had sex with me, damn it.
Yeah.
It's actually when you touch your third boob, that's where the problem starts, is that damn third gateway boob.
Yeah, and the next thing you know, it's the Crusades, Part 3, Deuce Vult.
Yeah. Well, we do need to save these girls for the men who will eventually save Western civilization, whenever that occurs.
And whatever that means. Do you ever notice they never can describe it other than to like point at Nancy, or what's her name? Nancy Drew? Nancy Reed? Donna Reed.
Donna Reed.
They always got to point the Ozzy and Harriet, Donna Reed. Yeah, that's back when men were men and women were women. It's like, yeah, that's back when people were trying to sell you vacuums. That's what they knew you wanted to watch.
They all just want to impregnate Lauren Southern and hope that that solves all their problems. And the fact is that this woman that you put up on a pedestal, she has a past too, and
and a present.
and a present, yes. And the fact is Tommy Lahren isn't going to be interested in 99% of those guys anyway, because they don't meet her qualifications of who's going to slip into her DMs. So this nonsense about trying to save women from pickup artists and guys who are red pill aware just so that they have somebody to breed with down the line once they've completed their quest for, whatever kind of purification that they're after. For one thing, I don't have time for that shit. I'm going to get with who I want and on my time frame. And secondly, who the hell are you to tell me who I can sleep with?
Damn straight.
Well, the thing with the old days, like my grandfather, he used to love. He's where I got my love of poetry and rhyme from, and he used to have this joke that he would tell every single guy. he knew, is like, your son looks like the milkman, he looks like the postman, he looks like the policeman. I think you're the only man your son doesn't look like.
And whether or not you're secure enough in your masculinity to hear that joke and laugh at it or be offended of it, I think says a lot about you.
Oh, the whole thing is, you never had like this perfect tradcon paradise where, you know, men were men, women were women. There were no cheating, no chads, no sleeping around. Everyone was a virgin until marriage. Well, you do have that. It's called Saudi Arabia, but I don't think they'd like to live there very much.
No.
And even
What's the thing? Yeah, if it was so common, Norman Rockwell wouldn't have made it a painting.
Well,
yeah, we need photographs.
Yeah, there'd be more photographs. That's right. And but I mean, there are photographs from that time period, and a lot of them are of Betty Page, so that might tell you something too.
Oh yeah, I forgot all about that. And then It Girls in the 20s.
Yeah,
the easygoing girls from the 50s. They're always
guys weren't painting the Virgin Mary on the side of their planes before they went off and killed the Japanese during World War II. You know, the archetypes of the women that they were looking for were not Donna Reed. They were Donna Reed in her underwear. So I mean, this whole fantasy about women being these chaste vessels of virtue, you know, pre-1950, is a lot of revisionist history on the part of people who simply don't know how to adjust to today's game.
Oh, and that's the thing. It's dehumanizing on so many levels because A, guys are doing that. They're treating women like broodmares. And B, women are acting like that's the most egregious situation they could be in. And then they go so far in the other direction to be the orneriest, most prickly, unattractive people ever just to avoid it. So it's like both people are spreading apart like you put in a drop of whatever, screw the metaphor. But yeah, they're just spreading so far apart from any normal human interaction to avoid this thing that never existed, nobody wants, and everybody pretends like it's the promised land. Yeah. It's ridiculous.
I don't want chattel. I own enough stuff that I need to maintain. Why do I need to maintain a human being? I mean, this is insane. This whole thing about, you know, I don't need some man to call my own, or no man is ever going to own me. Well, of course not. For one thing, the maintenance costs are too high. And secondly, if I could own you and sell you off and replace you with something younger, I don't think you'd like that either. So that's the perspective I take. I mean, you know, you let autonomous, well-adjusted people into your life because you choose to. And if you feel as though you need to get, you know, what some people like to refer as the oldest teenager in the house as your spouse, well, then, you know, you chose a dullard who happens to have a nice body, and that's the choice you make. But don't expect that person to impart any pearls of wisdom to the kids that you end up having. And if she can cook a lick, well, congratulations, you've used up all of her mental capacity in order to shove the Betty Crocker cookbook into that small skull of hers. So, you know, this whole, I would rather have a dumb girl, or I'd rather have a compliant,
high IQ,
compliant girl. Well, even, yeah, and the exact opposite too. You know, I'd rather have an alpha female, that whole dumb, you know, got a woman with a lot of male traits who some people have conflated with, you know, the alpha beta mindset. It's nonsense. You know, find somebody you like first instead of searching for characteristics.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, find something and just establish your boundaries. Like, you may not know what you like. Guys are horrible at that. We usually like whatever we used to have is what we tell ourselves we like. And that unfortunately closes us off to a lot of potential good things that we may not even know. And so I would say at the end of the day, you just enforce your boundaries and then get as much exposure to as many people as possible. And then naturally, the people that fit within your frame and your framework will come out the end of it. You just trust in the process.
Well, and I think this is where dogma a lot of times gets in the way of, again, you know, perfection of the person gets in the way of good enough, where guys set up too many boundaries that have been created by, you know, books and dead people and philosophers and things like that as to who they should accept as people in their life versus, having a lower set of expectations of others and just in enjoying the company of people and finding out who they might like. And it might end up being somebody that they completely didn't expect, just so long as they don't violate their own boundaries.
Yeah, and 80% is good. Is it worth the extra 10 years of your life to find somebody that goes from 80 to 85% of whatever you think is perfect?
Yeah, I mean, if a girl has... Go ahead, Carl.
No, I was going to say, I think the main issue and the thing where horseshoe theory kicks in, and I hate that we're over 2/3 of the podcast, motherfuckers, keep making me have to cite the horseshoe theory because I hate that idea. But the tradcons and the spurgs have the same idea, because the spurgs are like, oh, if only I can get into the top 2% of men, I can hack and override female agency. And the tradcons are like, we need traditional values to erect a firewall around female agency. And the fact of the matter is that no matter what you do, a certain percent of girls will be inclined to sleep with you, a certain percent will be inclined not to sleep with you, and everyone in between pretty much don't care about you. And the best thing you can do is you build a lifestyle that suits you, and you try and kind of be an adult about things. Like, don't eat like a 5-year-old, don't dress like a 5-year-old, clean your house, never use the word adulting, and just try to kind of be a guy that you would date. Like, when you look yourself in the mirror, ask yourself, would I objectively date me? And if you're overweight, if you're underdressed, undergroomed, don't have anything going for you, the answer would probably be no. And you just have to think that girls are human beings with agency and preferences. Some girls will think the guy who's ripped is awesome. Some girls prefer the guy who's less ripped. I mean, all girls like the guy who's between like 18 and 25 on the BMI. But some girls loved Rolo's look back when he was a rail thin, heroin chic rock star. Other girls like the more burly guy on the paper towels. And you just have to accept that no matter what you do, you can never get all girls. And no matter how strong you make the church and the traditional values, you will never be able to make sure that your wife will never leave you or cheat on you. The only thing you can do by getting rid of divorce, for instance, is, okay, so she doesn't divorce you, but she bangs the postman, the mailman, the milkman, and the cop.
And the cop. That's a bit too far. Well, that's the whole reason we do all this stuff, too. Everybody treats it, and this is funny, because you'll always see it with the middle-aged purple pill debate type soccer moms, is they treat heuristics as if they're immutable laws. The reason the guys say to lift, to get muscular, get lean, it's not because you're going to attract everybody, and you're going to find exceptions everywhere. Like, it's all women are like that is supposed to be a heuristic. Just to say that most women cluster around the mean. And so if you build value in those ways that the mean finds attractive, you're just getting yourself a larger potential group of women that are going to find you attractive. It's not going to be all, but it's going to be enough that you at least have a better chance. And if you're super, super niche, that the only girls that would like me are ones that are into obese, goth, EDM rappers. Like, you don't want to get to that level of segmentation, because at that point you can almost name the girls that could be attracted to you and count them on two hands.
Yeah, I don't think niching yourself into some kind of immutable market is the best way to go. Being open-minded beyond all of these self-imposed limitations is important, I think, to finding somebody that you're really compatible with. You're undressing a woman, and all of a sudden, you find that tiny butterfly tattoo on the top of her foot, and your first reaction is, "Oh, I can't do this. You've got a tattoo." I think again, you've missed the point. We're looking at heuristics, the way people may behave based on the way that they treat themselves. Those aren't necessarily hard and fast, but they can be, the red flags that Rich Cooper likes to talk about. Red flag number 487. she's got spinach in her teeth at dinner and she decides to pick it out with a fork instead of a toothpick. Can't go with that. Just some of these things get to the point of minutia for being, ridiculous. And, you just have to lighten up a little bit, Francis, and, let people come to you.
And that's it. Maybe you don't even want that. Maybe the idea of settling down with a girl interests you 0%. And all you want to do is be that Lothario for as long as you can. And you're an introvert. And you don't want women. And that's fine too. But at the same time, you're going to have urges. So even if you don't want a girl long term, most of your goals are going to revolve around having the option to have girls short term. And so the game doesn't change even if your goals do.
No, and that's true. But the fact that somebody needs to put themselves out there and say, hey, look, this is the type of person that I am acceptable of seeing. And if they don't meet this perfect expectation, I'm not going to see anyone. You're going to end up miserable. The abundance mindset is an accepting mindset, I think, more than people would recognize. You have to be around enough people to sample in order to find out what it is that you really like. And I think a lot of these guys are, pizza and chicken nugget 9-year-olds as opposed to, wanting to sample the entire buffet. And without having the experiences, this again falls into, notch count sometimes, but sometimes it's just being out and dating and being around other people. You need to experience people in order to figure out what it is that you want.
Yeah, you got to go learn to screw it up before you get a chance to know what not screwing it up even looks like. I couldn't agree more with that one. Oh, I hate this too because we're spending like an hour and a half now just sitting here agreeing with each other. That's the problem when you're around normally functioning adults, is that you generally tend to have disagreements at the margins, but they're never large. Because for the most part, you're aligned on being a healthy, socially functional person.
Well, I think at some point, we us three, if we ever get together on this again, we might want to discuss the timelines, or I guess the spectrum of where guys can fall. Because I am the married with kids guy, you're the long-term committed guy, and Carl's the player at this point. So we kind of span the whole spectrum of here are people with their shit together, and these are the type of interactions that they can have with women based upon what it is that they want. And again, it's a wants and needs type of question more than a what does Carl do different from Ryan apart from myself? The thing is that the method is very similar between us all, because being respectful of yourself and recognizing what it is that you want out of relationships from other people doesn't change as you age and as you enter into, I guess, more stringent forms of commitment.
That's a good way of
I would
putting
say
it.
too that one of the things that I kind of noticed changing with me now versus me at 20 versus me when I was married is that I'm much more discerning now. Like when I was 20 and running game, the most important thing was that the girl was hot. That was all I really cared about. I didn't care about the interactions. Then once I tried some relationship, and especially with that train wreck of a fucking marriage, one of the things I noticed was be more discerning and be more aware of what you want, and don't just look at the outcome, that box you need to check to move forward in life. And now I'm at the point where I'm looking for girls that I see myself at least having not a long-term commitment, but like a medium, like knowing them for at least a year. And I'm very straightforward with all the girls. Like, I'm not doing anything remotely close to monogamy until I've at least known you for a year. If you're still around after a year, we can have a discussion about it. Because to me, that's just kind of the cutoff point. And I think as you become more discerning with it, you start to see all those things that require you to look for red flags disappear. Because you don't need to look for red flags if you take the position, I'm not looking for a wife, I'm not looking for a girlfriend, I'm looking to get to know this girl, and we'll see what happens and let life takes its course. And, if she happens to almost stab me to death at month 6, then she's probably not a keeper.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You can only keep up. How does it work? I can't remember what they called it. The storming, norming, terraforming. It's something to do with group dynamics. You guys are business.
Norming, storming, forming, and performing. Norming, forming, storming, and performing. It's not terraforming.
Well, whatever.
We're not shaping the planet.
We're building Earths here, Ryan.
There's a question mark at the end of the sentence asking for clarification, not berating me. Jeez, boys. But that's the point, the whole reason of that. And I always laugh when guys say, I'm in a long-term relationship. You're like, oh, how long? You're like, 30 days. What's wrong with you? But yeah, because you can't, every guy who's had a BPD or a cluster B chick, they can usually keep up appearances for a while, a month, 2 months, 3 months, but they can't keep it up for 6 months. They definitely can't keep up that for a year, not without you seriously deluding yourself. And the whole point is saying, wait at least a year is so you can filter through those phases of a group where you get through your terraforming periods.
Yeah, I think a girl can keep it up longer when she's younger. Only because she can keep you in bed for longer periods of time. So my personal experience with the crazy chick, quote unquote, was that we would be in bed for 3 days at a time. Just order in, grab food, rehydrate, and get back at it. And that type of person can completely hide their personality because all you're doing is using each other. And, those types of relationships can go for a longer period of time simply because you don't meet any of the hard questions like, who's going to pay this bill or anything like that. You're just going at it like rabbits. So that type of relationship, I think over time, as you're older and you add more responsibilities in, becomes less sustainable on her end, especially, and it becomes more apparent in a shorter amount of time when real world responsibilities hit her love bombing and kind of throw it off track.
Yeah, I can see that. And at the same time, if all you want is that girl that does nothing but take out and order in and whatever, you'll enjoy it for a little while, and then she'll probably move on when she finds a boyfriend. Maybe she breaks up with her boyfriend, you get back to it, but yeah, that's the thing. And then you can't, that's the problem, because you see a lot of these guys, and that's the only kind of girl they've wanted, and they never developed any skills past that. So even if you don't want it, and this is how you end up finding God later on, because you find out that everything you use just to attract girls and get them into bed, regardless of anything else, once you get old enough that you're looking for something else, you're grasping at straws because you had 20 years to practice and you've squandered it all on takeout and sex.
Well, I think this is one of the major things that we kind of gloss over in the sphere, and that is most of the guys that come here and look for game advice, they're 5 to 10 years at least behind their peers when it comes to being a normal, well-adjusted human being.
Oh yeah,
they have to put in a lot of work to catch up, and then once they do that, they usually want to spend 5-6 years playing around, or they kind of screw up and they're back in a relationship in 10 days. But anyway, the whole thing is...
Steve McQueen, shout out to him.
Well, you have to kind of work. You have to work on your attraction skills, but you also have to work on your relationship management skills. So you can kind of see who the experienced guys are versus the non-experienced guys, because the non-experienced guys are like, well, if she does even one thing that I don't like, hard next, no questions asked.
Oh, those are always annoying.
Okay, unless she pulls a gun on you, hard next. You kind of have to do something extraordinary for hard next. You soft next for smaller things. Like if she's 20 minutes late, you don't soft next her over that. You kind of chide her a little bit and say, hey, be on time next time.
Yeah, and then the next time you can soft next,
it's not acceptable. Yeah, and you kind of take it from there. It's not like these are the kind of guys who end up like on Scott Peterson levels of insane.
Well, think about it if other things work that way. Picture police, the continuum of force, where they have to meet or exceed by one level the amount. So if a criminal's coming at you, your first response is presence. Officer presence usually is good, and then it escalates up to deadly force from there. Imagine if every crime committed, a cop immediately went to deadly force. That's exactly what you're describing there. Or every time a firefighter goes to a fire, maybe it only needed 2 seconds with a fire extinguisher, but he brings out the hose and just drenches the house. Like, it's completely non-nuanced. And it's just, I want to say it's on the spectrum, but I find that's way too easy of an answer for everything that unattractive men do. But it's so fitting here.
No, it's reactionary. It's a lack of experience met with lost, broken expectation. And the first time that you have someone defy you, who you think in your own mind is this pedestalized version of the female that I want to spend time with, and she basically looks at you and says, "No, I'm going to do what I want to do, regardless of what it is that you feel about it," then, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I mean, you have to learn to regulate. And again, that comes with experience. And if you end up moving in with the first person who touches your dick, generally that doesn't work out very good for most guys.
That's an understatement.
Usually they find themselves being pressured by their girl's father to put a baby in her.
You're just savage today, Carl.
Yeah.
That's a huge problem if you had to go on TRT when you were like 22 and have been on trend ever since, because I hear that does a number on your fertility.
It does. And, if you hang out too much in the Chilean mountains, I've also heard that that high altitude may have something to do with that lower sperm production. So, there's that too. And if you're not working for the helicopter tossing team, and you happen to just be living there in town and not really doing anything but focusing on continental philosophy, then you just don't have the time to make those babies anyway.
I want to add to this, but I can't because I'm too busy laughing. I gotta mute.
Oh. Yeah, we're hammering our way. We're hammering Ryan so hard he's almost becoming a sickle.
Oh, geez.
We went
All right, I'm good.
Well, we'll help our comrade at some point.
Dude, commies. Dude, they trained me. 12 years I was trained to fight commies, which is weird because they haven't existed in 20, but whatever. And the funniest part about the commies is that when you meet a guy who actually used to be a commie, they're like, nah, screw that noise. I ain't going near that. It's always guys that have no idea. That's right. The theme for all of this stuff is guys who don't know, assuming they know and have a plan to get past it. Like, you don't know.
Right. Most former communists remember that the greatest time of their life was learning about Metallica and Pepsi.
Yeah.
So,
staring at that piece of the wall they got hanging on the mantelpiece.
Yeah. I actually interned with two guys who were east of the wall back in the days where I worked for the National Park Service, and they were two of the nicest guys you ever want to meet, and they would never go back to that again. Once I took them to Spearmint Rhino in Vegas for a weekend, their lives were changed forever.
That's awesome. All right. So I guess we got a couple more minutes here. We got to switch over, have a quick breakfast for me anyway, and then we're off to Red Man Group on the hour. So do you guys got any closing thoughts?
Well, just real quick on the, perfect versus good enough. If you're going to sit around and attempt to be perfect, I just give you the advice of children's books on the subject, where it's best just to sit around and sip weak tea in a dark room and do nothing, because you can't screw up nothing. And being a person who just sits in a room and sips weak tea may make you perfect in those activities, but you're going to lead a very boring and unfulfilling life. So, get out there, make mistakes, get messy, deal with some pussy farts every once in a while you're fucking, and be the man that you want to become, as opposed to some avatar of virtue and a bastion of nothing.
Yeah, I'm going to be on that same note. A lot of this time, I get the feeling like the guys who are asking the questions and a lot of the guys who are trying to teach have not actually been out in the real world and have not really dealt with how messy that gets, and they're not calibrated. It's like the same thing with the whole "this is what a gender war looks like" narrative that some guys are pushing. And it's okay, I'm around women and I'm out in the world constantly. I don't spend all my life in an echo chamber on twitter.com. So you kind of see that, okay, most girls are not hardcore bra burning feminists. Most people are not SJWs. Most people are just normal people trying to go about their lives, doing the best they can to put food on the table, keep a roof over their head, stay dressed, and get laid once in a while. Mm-hmm. And once you can kind of start approaching people as individuals, not as, she is a girl, therefore I need to escalate my hypergamy busting to level 1.37 so I can get through this Kobayashi Maru. Once you kind of drop that and you try and be a normal, well-adjusted human being who does not need to be put in a straitjacket and medicated, and who doesn't create Shutter Island-style fantasies in their head for why the world isn't the way they think it ought to be, life can actually be very, very enjoyable. And by doing so, you'll naturally get close to that top 20%, because who do we want to hang out with? Do we want to hang out with well-adjusted people who share some of our interests, who are interesting conversational partners, and who we enjoy spending time with? Or do we want to spend time with the guy who treats girls like a D&D game? It's like, okay, she just threw me a shit test. I'm going to cast my 6-sided dice to see what my response should be. Oh, spurging out. Damn, I was hoping for a mastery.
On your one-sided dice, yes.
I was hoping for agree and amplify, and instead I went to scream at her over the phone. Fuck.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll add on to that one then. The only thing left is that perfect, well-adjusted stuff. I do like a lot of the theory and the gender war, like studying the extremes, but learn it so you can forget about it as quickly as possible. I find those extreme examples are great if at detecting those warning signs. So even if girls aren't feminists, but there is some things that feminism will affect that you need to be aware of. But until it comes up, just forget about it. Stop looking for demons. Wait until you're in hell first. And then on top of that, it's like Carl and Corey, you both are saying it, and you have it pretty much bang on. At the end of the day, if we're not making you happier, more fulfilled, and better, then why would you listen to us? Like, there's no point if we're just here to sulk and wallow in our own self-pity. I would much rather put up with guys that have some moral failings, but generally help me improve my life, as long as those moral failings don't enter my life, than I would be for somebody who's completely untouchable, but dour, ornery, and just prickly. But I guess, yeah, with that, I'll leave you guys here. We're going to see you in about 15 minutes on Redman Group. Feel free to check on that channel too, and we'll talk to you guys later.